Complementary angles is what we are going to discuss in the session. What are complementary angles? Now that we have discussed about the different types of angles, now let's enter into understanding the types of angles extended with the definition complementary angles. What are complementary angles? The angles whose sum is 90 degrees is called complementary angles. That is, when I take the angles x and y, if x plus y equals 90 degrees, then we say the angles x and y are complementary angles. Let's see the definition more briefly. Imagine I have two lines which are perpendicular to each other. There are two lines out here which are perpendicular to each other. Imagine there's an angle between them. There's another line which makes an angle x and y with the given perpendicular lines. Now, since we know that the whole line is perpendicular, therefore my each angle being x and y, the sum would be 90. Therefore, clearly I can see from this diagram that angle x plus angle y equals 90 degrees. And when sum of two angles is 90, then we call x and y to be complementary angles. Two angles are said to be complementary if the sum of those two angles is equal to right angle, which is 90 degrees, as can be seen with this example problem. Complementary angles. Now next is about supplementary angles. Let's see what do we mean by supplementary angles. As with the similar definition of complementary angles, now comes defining the supplementary angles. Supplementary angles. If the sum of two angles is 180 degrees, then we say the two angles are supplementary angles. So let's see the definition more briefly. Imagine I take a straight line. Let me say there's another line which cuts this line at some angle. Therefore, I have this line which cuts these two angles, say with angle x, and this is angle y. Now clearly when I see this part being angle x and this part being angle y, clearly angle x is acute and angle y is obtuse, because this is less than 90 and this is more than 90. As can be seen with an imaginary perpendicular line, this will be more than 90, less than 90. X is acute, y is obtuse. Also, when I observe this, I know that angle in a straight line is always 180 degrees, is what we know as the property. So since the angle in a straight line is 180, this whole angle must be 180 degrees. And also, when I connect this with this x and y, I see that angle x plus angle y makes the whole angle of the straight line. Therefore, as seen from the diagram, x plus y is 180, and we have the property that if the sum of the angles is equal to 180 degrees, then the two angles are called supplementary angles. if this equals this, implies x and y are called supplementary angles. Supplementary angles and its definition. So the learning outcome is, if the sum of the angles is 90, the two angles are called complementary angles. If the sum of two angles is 180 degrees, then the two angles are called supplementary angles. Complementary and supplementary angles. Now that we have discussed about supplementary and complementary, it is also very important that we also know some basic angle rules in lines and angles. So let's see some basic rules in angles, how we define the different types of angles existing in geometry. For example, initially I have adjacent angles. What are adjacent angles? The word adjacent means the one besides the other. Therefore, when we take two angles, the rule is that the two angles are said to be adjacent when one is exactly besides the other. For example, let's take an example case. For example, I have two lines out here where this angle is x and this angle is y and this angle is z, x, y, z. Now here, let's see how the adjacent angles can be applied to this. Now clearly I see that x and y are besides each other, but when I take the pairs x and z, they are not besides each other. So very clearly I can say x and y are adjacent angles. Y and z also are adjacent because they are besides each other, are also adjacent angles, but when I take this angle x and this angle z, they are not adjacent because clearly they are separated by the angle y, as can be seen. Therefore, but x and z are not adjacent angles because they are not side by side. Is the rule I identify in adjacent angles. Two angles are adjacent if they are besides or side by side. XY adjacent, YZ adjacent, XZ not adjacent is how I understand the adjacent angles in the geometry of the planes. Next is about linear pair of angles. Let's see what are linear pair of angles. As clearly the word itself says, linear pair. What do we mean by linear pair? That means the angles involved in a straight line. The pair of angles involved in a straight line. Linear pair indicates pair of angles involved in a straight line. Let's see how the pair of angles are involved in a straight line. In order for that, I need a straight line. So let's draw a straight line and see. I have a straight line out here represented by L. Then I have another line or a ray which makes an angle when it intersects the straight line out here, intersects the straight line L out here, it makes two angles X and Y. So in such case, we clearly see this pair of X and Y to be the linear pair because these two angles together make a straight line. That means for the pair of angles to be linear pair, the sum must be 180, or the sum must be, or the angles must be supplementary angles as learnt in the previous case. Therefore, clearly I see here that X and Y are pair of angles involved in a straight line. Or pair of angles involved in a straight line. Also, if you notice here, we observe that X plus Y equals 180, as can be seen in the linear pair, since L is a straight line. Therefore, I can say X and Y are supplementary or supplementary angles. Therefore, we have X and Y are said to be linear pair if XY are supplementary, is how I make the learning outcome. The condition that X and Y are linear pair of angles is that X and Y must be supplementary. That is, X plus Y must be equal to 180, or it must be in a straight line. This is how we understand the linear pair or supplementary in a straight line. They cannot be supplementary outside the straight line, but on a straight line they must be supplementary, and hence for linear pair they must be on a straight line. X and Y are linear pair of angles when they are involved in a straight line. Angle X and angle Y is how we understand.
If you like this video, please give a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel to get more videos on CBSE syllabus.